I'll wait for a few people to get on here. This is the Bullet 80 car. 6.2 kit. Wait for a few more to get on here. I was going to go over the build and the setup of this car, just starting from front to back, so people that have bought the chassis know how to build it and kind of see my setup and electronics and the whole thing. This car rocked on Sunday, so hoping the other guys that and girls that build the Bullet car have the same experience. So okay, we got a few on here. Let me see here. Hey Jake. Okay. I'm gonna start on the front end, and I'm gonna take the front tires off. The front tires that I'm running, I kind of made. They're just a standard Proline tire, wheel rather, and they're a Proline tire that I've kind of shaved down. So I'm looking for a short tire so I can get the body really low. So it's just a hard rubber tire that I've sanded and small, so it's I can run the body low. So we'll take this off. Get this off here. Okay, so I built this out of a Associated B62. I followed the kit instructions to build the entire front end on the arms. So I have 3mm. I got the best lighting I could, but it's still probably not the greatest. I'm running 3mm on the bottom, 1 on the top, I believe. And I'm just moving this around. This is a different type of adjustment for off-road, but for this application for drag racing, I'm just trying to get the right droop because the chassis limits the suspension. So this setting is what I started with. It seems to be about right where I get a good amount of travel on the suspension. So it looks like it's 3 on the bottom, it's 1 on the top. Standard kit, ball stud locations and spacers. So looks like there's no spacer on this ball stud for the steering. There's no spacer on the ball stud for the camber link. So they're all just following the instructions. And I got it on this ball stud is on the inside. So there's 2 different settings for that ball stud. This one's on the inside. And there's only 1 hole for the steering, but it's the kit recommendation. So if you follow the B62 kit, I think there might be a few different size arms maybe, but everything on this portion of it is all from the B62 kit. If we move down a little bit, I have the shock. So the shock, there's no internal limiters. I'm running 45 weight oil. It looks like I have some external limiters, and I think it's I'm pretty sure it's 4mm on the inside. The goal is when it moves up, I just want it to stop right before the chassis hits the ground. So this could be a variable for you guys, depending on the size tire that you run. You just want, hey Jordan, how you doing, man? You just want the tire, whatever size tire you run, you want it to, let me see here. You want the chassis at full compression to just barely miss the ground, right? So it's sitting, you're not gonna rub the chassis on the ground, but you're not losing any of your suspension travel. So that's what the limiters are. I think I'm running 4mm, but this is a pretty small tire. And then I took if you can see, the shock is on the very last hole. There's 3 different holes you can put it in. And I'm taking a drill bit from this side and I just drill straight through. You can kind of use the existing hole as an index. This hole is smaller than this hole because in the stock kit, the screw feeds through this hole and threads into this one. So all you want to do is extend this hole size all the way through. Use it as a guide. It drills really straight when you get the right drill because this is a guide for it. And then I'm running about 5mm of this isn't a crucial space, but you got to have the shock be pretty straight. So I'm running 5mm on this. The shorter you make it, the stronger it is. The longer you make it, the better the geometry. So I'm kind of splitting the difference. Anywhere between 4 to 5mm would be about right for this. The goal is when you set the car flat, the shock moment is perpendicular to the pin, right? So you want the shock straight up and down. So that's shock, that's the outside of it. If we move into the center a little bit more, I have on the top, I'm using, because my shock tower is a little bit thinner, I'm using a 2mm spacer to space the shock mount on the top out. I'm doing this so it barely misses the shock tower. So you need to space this out just a little bit, give yourself a little bit of room where this shock, when it moves up and down, does not hit the tower. And it looks like about 2 or 3mm will accomplish that. Might be 3 actually. It looks like that's a 3mm spacer. So 3mm between the shock tower and the shock mount on this side. Then I'm running an Exotec Mount on the top. So this is separate from the associated kit and my kit. This is the body mount that I'm using on the front. It's Exotec. I'm running a 3x8mm screw to center it. So let me see if I get a good shot at this. I run a centering screw on this side. Let's see here. Can I get that? There's basically 2 holes. There's a hole that I'm using for a centering hole that keeps the mount from pivoting, and then I'm using the shock screw for the other mount. So it's mounted by 2 holes. It keeps it straight. I'm using a set screw for the second hole that goes through into the shock mount, and then just a little screw on the top, like a 3x6. So I'm using both holes in the Exotec mount. The shock actually goes through the middle hole of the shock tower. So when you look at the shock tower, there's actually 3 holes in here. I'm using the middle one. You can try different ones, but this one's the one that misses the mount, since I'm moving the mount up and down, and it doesn't lay the shock down too far, right, and hit the ball stud. So this one's kind of at least for the stock shock, this is kind of the optimum setting, is the middle hole in the shock tower. Then while we're at this view, I also, if you can see, I'm using the middle hole here, excuse me, for the ball stud. And I've seen a couple pictures now with people mounting the shocks in the middle and shocks on the front, and there's a couple different ways to build this front end. For the way I have it built, the ball stud is on the middle of the 3 holes in the shock tower with no ball stud spacers on the back side. So that gives you space away from the shock. Hey, Kelly. Gives you space away from the shock and a free movement, right? Your end goal is you want this to move exactly up and down, no bump steer, and no bind anywhere, not hitting the body mount, not hitting anything. It should feel nice and smooth. And the other thing to check when you have this all done, I can go over bump steer, but you want as little bump steer as you can. And I know a few people have messaged me on how to get the bump steer out. So that's the tower, the outer part. On the bulkhead, there's 2 different ways to mount the bulkhead, and this pin that goes through the arm is offset. So when the bulkhead sits flat on the chassis, the pinhole that goes through needs to be high, so that it'll give you some down travel of the suspension arm. So this bulkhead, the hole isn't right in the center of the bulkhead. The hole needs to be high. And then the shock tower bolts on with 2, actually it's 4, sorry. I only have 2 in there, but there is 4 holes. 4 3x6mm bolts in the front. There's 2 on the bottom that I don't have in there that I need to put in. So the rack it's the stock associated rack, but the only difference in the front end from the kit build is I have to flip the rack. So I'm taking, if you look at it, I don't know if I can get a good view here. Here we go. This rack, normally the top, it's normally flipped over from the kit. I'm flipping the rack. The reason why I'm flipping the rack is, and I have the little 1mm spacer underneath it that comes in the kit. So this whole rack is spaced up 1 millimeter, and then the rack's flipped. And when you look at it straight on, the reason for that is you want these arms to be parallel with each other. So these arms are the same length, and when you have the same length arm and parallel, when they articulate up and down, there'll be no bump steer. So that's the goal with the front end. Yeah, when you grow up, yeah, maybe you should get one when you grow up. So when you articulate up and down, there's no bump steer, there's no movement of the front end. It's a pretty true front end geometry when these are parallel and the same length. So flip the rack, stock outer end, and you'll get that end result, which is good. I'm using so that's pretty much the front end build. This one is 13.5 millimeters long. I'm sorry, 13.5 inches, which is the NPRC rule. So we have a rack on the bottom that you can move these bolts back and forth. The second one from the inside, this is 13 when you bolt it here, this is 13.5. So you can go 14 and you can go 14.5. So I have it at 13.5, which is the second hole in from the end towards the end of the chassis, towards the center of the chassis. That right there is 13.5 inch wheelbase. The Servo Mount, there's been a lot of different kind of cool mounts out there. This is the stock Kit AE mount. I've just spaced it up with ball stud washers to get it off the chassis because it's kind of a T. And I'm using just the bottom bolt on the servo to raise the servo up and get the servo arm above the rack so that I can get a good geometry on the stock rack. So that's kind of what it looks like when it's all done. This is a servo arm that's been cut. It's actually, every car that I build, I try to have something from Brian Kinwald on it. I got a bunch of his parts, so that's an arm from Brian Kinwald that he cut. So it looks a little rough on here, but it's a sentimental arm. Other car has like gold bolts on it, on holding the gearbox on that are his bolts or something, right? So it's my way to always have Brian with me. At some point, it's some way that's his arm. So I run an Mks Servo. I have a max amps battery, and then that's pushed right up against the servo, so as much front weight as I can get. And then R1 speed control. On the R1 speed control, I soldered 10 gauge wire on it, so it's gives it a little bit more chance to live under a high load. You're not having a lot of resistance to wire. I'd recommend doing that, but don't heat up the board a lot. So that's pretty much the front end. I'm using just a low C body mount because I don't have anything else, but I know there's a lot of different mounts that fits in these Exotec things. So this right now is fit for the vet body. Hey Scott, how you doing? So if we move to the back, let me take this tire off real quick. So this car's only had about, I'd say 8 runs on it or so. 4 of them out at Coy's run. And so far, I'm using completely stock spur gear. I think it's like a 75 stock slipper, set pretty tight. You can see the screws tightened down pretty good. And the only thing I'm really doing to the gearbox is putting, like I said in my other videos, I'm putting the metal idler gear in it. But it seems to live great. There's no strength issues. So the gearbox is raised up to fit flat on the chassis, and if you look at the bottom, there's looks like there's 8 bolts that bolt the box on. I'm not using the center ones, but all of these bolts, besides the very back one, right? So the C block in the back, there's a C and a D block, the very back block. All of these have 2 millimeter spacers in it, and the very back one, because I'm not running the bumper, has a 4 millimeter spacer. The bumper is a 2 millimeter thick bumper, so if you want to run 2 millimeter all the way across and put the bumper in, that works too. But definitely make sure that all these spacers are very accurate, 2 millimeter. Don't get one wrong. When I built this the first time, I had a 1.5 millimeter spacer in one of these, and when I tightened it down, it twisted the chassis a little bit. When I put it on the scales, it was impossible to get to read right. I spent an hour trying to get the scale correct. It was twisted a little, so when I pulled the gearbox off, I realized I had an incorrect spacer, fixed it, it was solid. So 2 millimeter all the way across. If you're not running a bumper, then 4 millimeter on the very back. That should bolt everything on the chassis. I'm running, at least with this wheelie bar, I'm running the least amount of anti-squat and the least amount of toe in that the pills will allow you. So it's it's let me think about this. It's outside and down in the front, and it's inside and up in the back where the holes are. I'm mounting shocks backward, so weight on the back. These are kit stock shocks, no limiters inside, no limiters outside. The only limit that we have is the chassis limit, which seems to be about right for the ride height. That was kind of our goal, is you don't have to pile a bunch of spacers in it. The shock rests on the chassis, or the arm rests on the chassis, and gives you a fairly straight dog bone length or dog bone angle at full droop, which is kind of what you want, right? At actual run height, it's probably about like that. So you got a little bit of space, but that's just no limiters in the shocks. It's just resting on the chassis. It seems to be an extremely accurate way to get the droop correct front and back. Grabbing onto the arm, I know on-road uses like a droop screw, but we're using the chassis as a standard droop, and it seems to be about right. So I'm running standard bones, standard hubs. The hubs and the diff are as high as you can get them. So I have the diff up in the transmission. I think it's +3. It might be different, but it's the highest you can get the diff in the gearbox. And then the hub is the highest I can get the axle. So the goal is to get the lowest ride height and still have a fairly flat geometry. So it's kind of a carpet type setup. So you combine that height with the spacers under the gearbox, and you get like a +4 or 5 compared to the off-road kit, which is seems like it's about perfect for drag racing and get you a little bit of a lower stance. I have the same spacers in the back here as I do in the front. I'm running looks like maybe a 3 millimeter spacer between the shock and the tower. I think you could probably mount this straight. I was just going for a similar look front and back. The shock has just a little bit of an angle, but the pin has a little bit of an angle too. So my goal is to, again, try to get the shock and the pin perpendicular with each other. So when the movement's up and down, the shock is at the most active angle, right? Exactly perpendicular. I'm running, I didn't mention this either. I'm running the stock pistons. I'm running 45 in the front. Right now I'm running 60 weight in the back, and it seems a little soft. I might up it a little bit, but I mean, obviously it really hauled butt, so it's not that far off, but I think I might go to 70 or 80 in the back. But currently right now it's stock pistons, 45 in the front, and 60 weight in the back. And then the front springs are kit springs. I went to a 5-pound buggy spring in the back, and I still think it's too soft. So I don't necessarily think the shock package is optimized in the back. I've only run it a few times, but I'm just telling you what's on here. You guys can start here, and then if you find something better, please post it. But I think it's a red AE spring, 5.2 pound, and 60 weight in the back. And then I'm running outside hole all the way on the outside. So this shock is all the way on the outside, and I'm running outside on the tower. And the reason for that is I just want the shock really active and the spring really active as I can get. Makes the oil act stiffer and the spring act stiffer. So I'm trying to, have as active a shock in the back as I can. What's am I missing here? I'm running a gear diff. The gear diff that's in here, I have 60K in it. I thought it was light, but it seems to, hey Dan, hey Lisa. I thought it was going to be really light, but it didn't get, I think when you have too loose of a diff, the car will kind of walk on the high end, and putting down a massive amount of power. It wasn't walking on the high end at all, so I think the diff was stiff enough, but if it's an error, it's probably light. I might go a little stiffer on it and try it. These mounts I think are Pro line, but they might be discontinued. I'm just telling you what's on here. There's got to be another option for a mount, but this is what I had to use. So again, Exotec mounts here. Reverse, when you reverse them like this, it fits the vet body pretty good. This fits right in the flat spot of the vet body, so that's why I'm running it that way. If you have a different body, you can flip these around and make just about any body fit with them. Let's see, Wheelie Bar. So this is, it's the Vanishing Point Wheelie Bar, made for this car. It's made for an associated car. It has I put 60 weight oil in the bar. I know Troy runs thicker oil than that, and Kelly. I start out pretty soft, and this is the spring that it comes with. I think it's a 14-pound spring. This wheelie bar feels really good with two 14-pound springs. It gets tight quick, and it mounts to the Diff housing, the gearbox housing with little standoffs he gives you. So the geometry is pretty good. I really like the way the bar turned out on the car. The questions I've seen with this are the mount on the top. There's a couple different versions. I think Frank Greer posted. He's got a touring car little mount that maybe works better than the Custom Works mount, but the 3mm screw will screw through this mount that comes with the Custom Works shock. It's just a little tight because all the Custom Works stuff is American, and everything that's on this car is metric 3mm. So the 3mm screw is a little bigger. This will, but you can just thread the 3mm screw through the standard mount, threads through, hits this stud, and the geometry is good. I'm running some weight on the back. It's kind of experimental. I don't know if you guys want to try this or not, but I've been messing around with that, and he gives a nice sticky, grippy Traxxas wheel with his wheelie bar. So the whole thing moves super smooth. I really like the shocks that he's providing with them. I thought for being a small shock, they might kind of be cheap feeling, but these suckers feel really, really good. I thought about using his kit and changing out all the shocks to these little shocks and save a little bit of weight. There's one thing that I changed on his wheelie bar setup that I wanted to show you too. The main problem that we've talked about or we have with this wheelie bar is the joint. The joint gets loose. You can take the wheelie bar and move it right back and forth, and it's a really critical joint because if the wheelie bar gets at an angle at all, when it's up on the bar and the front end's off the ground, it's going to want to turn. So me and my brother talked about how to get a better joint. We talked about bearings and thrust washers and all this stuff to try and get this joint stronger, because it's kind of almost the midpoint of the car has to be really strong. But a simple solution without completely changing the design is Troy's hole is usually this mounting hole is a little bit loose a lot of times. So I'm putting a countersunk screw here, which centers itself in the chassis. And you put a countersunk screw in each side, it centers itself in that hole, and then I put a lock nut on the opposite side on his mount. You can see the lock nut right there. So before the race, I'll just check and make sure that thing feels snug. You snug that countersunk bolt into the standard hole, and it centers in the hole, but it's only riding on a very small portion of the hole. So you get this very secure joint, and it doesn't seem to loosen up because of that lock nut. So I'd recommend doing that until we come up with a better solution of a bearing or something there. That's a really critical joint, and that's a good way to make it feel real tight. Real simple, just a countersunk screw and a lock nut on the other side. So that's the only change I've done to this bar. Other than that, this wheelie bar is magic. It works extremely well. So it fits the car well. Let's see. I want to put the body on and kind of show you how I'm mounting. Let me put the tires back on. I'll put the body on, and I'll show you, at least for the vet body, I think the vet body is probably the best body out there. I tried a couple other bodies, and on the top end, I can't put the power down because you don't have the downforce. I think the vet body has the most downforce, and the amount of power that we're making now, downforce is good. So I think I tried a standard body, like a octane body, Friday night, first taking it out, and it would just blow the tires off on the top end if it didn't have any downforce on it. So putting the vet body on it, Coy's road, granted it's a different road, but it put down a ton of power. So definitely recommend the vet body. Get the tires on, and I'll show you what I'm talking about with the body here. These tires in the front, you might not be able to get away with what I'm doing as much, but I'll give you the idea, and you guys can try and find some tires and some smaller front end parts. But these tires, I got lucky and found these tires that were pretty low profile or small. And I've seen other cars that have really small fronts. So I used to make this O-ring tire that got kind of made illegal, but it was really small and I could put the body really close to the ground, but I can't do that anymore. So this is a good alternative. You grab the body. So vent body, I have a Wings That Work wing on it. I like it. I also have a couple bodies here. Have Greg Bridgewater's super badass wing on the back and the splitter on the front. So either one work amazing. Recommend both. The car that I was running had that Wings That Work wing on it. And the cool thing, let me see if I can get this right here. If I get a good video or a good, this is kind of important, especially when you reach some pretty good speeds. You want to reduce your frontal area as much as you can. There's all sorts of cool ways to do it, but when you have a small front tire, you can, this doesn't just apply for this car too. I'm kind of giving out some secrets that maybe I shouldn't, but I'll give them out anyway. Oh, Troy Stacy's on here too. Troy, good to see you, man. Okay, so what I'm doing on the front, let's see if I can get this a little better. Sorry. Okay, I've actually taken, I'm going to kind of show you the view of the front. So the front, since the tire is so small, I can get the body down really low. And when I can get the body down really low, I can cut the front fairing off pretty high too. So I'm going for the lowest profile tire I can that still has room where it doesn't hit the body, and then cut the fairing off as low as I can get so that you reduce the whole frontal area when you get really moving out. You know, I could probably reduce the height of this body by a half an inch or so, and it makes a pretty big difference when you reach some of the speeds we're reaching. You want to reduce that frontal area, and when you reduce the front, it angles the whole body and gives you more downforce. So little front tire, you know, I've cut this all the way into the grill, and the thing sits right on the ground until it hits the bump stops. That's a good front end for a car. There's not a lot of frontal area, and the minute it hits here, it's pushing down on the front. So that's kind of the goal that you want to do with the body. And then the back, I look for, since the reaction tire doesn't expand anymore, I used to have to run these really tall bodies that didn't rub on because the tire expanded really big and you wouldn't want to rub the body because it can pull the car. But now with the reaction tire, you can set the back of the body down pretty good too. So I just have a little tiny mark thing. Ran 70s, you know, middle 70 mile an hour, and I got this little tiny mark. I think the tire was starting to fail on the edge, but other than that, there's no rub on the body, front or back. It's important when you get a rub on a body, it can pull you hard one way or the other if one side rubs first. So good rule of thumb is get the body as low as you can. I tape where the tires are, where it would hit the body, and I'll run the car. If there's no rub, then I'll lower it more, and I'll keep lowering it until it rubs, and I up it just a little bit, right? And that's as low as you can get the body without rubbing the tire. That's the goal. I don't run a lot of wing angle. I think that's about it. I don't know. If you guys got questions on the build, feel free to message me. Try to go over as much as possible. One other thing I might have forgot on the back side of it is I'm running, when you run these spacers on the arms, top and bottom, I'm running the tires back as far as I can get. So any spacer required on the arm, put them on the front side so it moves the arm back. And then any spacers required on the hub, I have the hub spacers all the way back also. So it gives you the longest wheelbase possible. When you do it that way, your drive line is really straight. There's not a lot of angle on the drive line. The kit, the arms can be, or the drive lines can be kind of angled forward a little bit. So back as far as you can, this screw pattern, and you'll have 13.5 inch car almost exactly. I think it's within a 16th, so right on the limit of being legal. think that's about it. Trying to think if I forgot anything. I think that's it. As you guys, I know a bunch of you guys got the AE kit now, so if you got questions, post them up. If there's enough of those questions that I missed in this video, I'll make another video covering the common questions, but it's a pretty simple build. You can use the instructions to build 90% of it. The front end geometry is just a little bit different with the bulkhead, but the back build's exactly like the kit. I'm putting a lot of horsepower through the drivetrain with no failures. You know, this car is a completely kit stock, no titanium, nothing crazy. The only thing I'm really adding from the kit is that metal gear. Yeah, it's vanishing point bar, B62 kit, and bullet chassis, and the thing, it could be, I might be wrong, but I don't think so. It's going to go sub 2s next time we run, so it's pretty impressive for being all over the counter kind of stock parts, nothing crazy. So message me with questions. Thanks for watching, everybody, and thanks for being a part of the whole bullet thing. It's pretty cool. Talk to you guys soon.